Why are we doing that? I'm with you.
Less than Kuwait.
I was gonna go home and grab a motorcycle and come down. Less than Kuwait, is that what you said? Were you on the tarmac into Kuwait?
Yes, I was deployed to Kuwait for a year. And when it got over 115, the bobby pins in my hair would burn my head.
Oh my
With
goodness.
the hat on.
Like being in a dry sauna.
And it was like a blast.
Jeez. So I think you might win the award for hottest temperatures. I know Arizona though and Texas can get about 115 too, right?
I've been in Phoenix when it was 122.
122 was like a cool day.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember just walking somewhere thinking, I'm gonna pass out on the sidewalk and die right here. It's only a block and a half.
Wow. Yeah.
Been in Palm Springs when it was 124.
Ah.
Yeah, and I made a
These
mistake.
numbers don't make sense to me.
I moved here for temperatures less than this.
When
Arizona State.
When it was 122, it was right after a monsoon
Oh,
that knocked
you-
out the power for 3 days.
Okay, let's,
Wow.
we're gonna get started. So. Everybody, if we have a quorum, it looks like we do. And so it is 5:30 on Monday, June 9th. And I will call this Joint Animal Services Commission regular meeting to order. It looks like we have everyone except for the county is here so far. So with that, can I get a motion to approve our agenda and consent agenda items?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve our agenda and consent agenda items. Is there any discussion about our agenda and consent agenda items? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously, and we will get into our first agenda item, which is our public comment. I didn't see anybody signed up for public comment. I checked the list on the way in. Is there anybody online wishing to comment?
We technically didn't have anybody signed up, but I do see somebody, I see AJ Mai here on Zoom, so I'm not sure if they are here to give public comment.
Hi, I'm actually not here to give public comment. I am Commissioner Klaus's new EA, so I'm just filling in until she signs on.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that,
problem.
AJ. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. She's actually just hopped on, so.
Perfect.
Thank you. And so next on our agenda, were there any written public comments?
We received no written public comment.
Next item on our agenda is under regular business items, and we will start with shelter stats and field data for April and May, and our executive director, Sarah Huck, presenting.
All right, as we discussed, this year, we're talking about our statistics a little bit differently this year. Wanting to share our statistics real time, so commissioners can understand the grasp of intake and adoptions and the number of animals moving through the facility as well as field calls. And so all of these numbers are current as of May 31st. So thankfully, while we are still on a higher level of intake, for April and May, we actually did level out slightly, which is good. Still technically over the intake that we did last year, but a little bit more on par for April and May with 2023. A lot of these are going to be dogs, not as many cats. So as you can see, we're still, we're at a 32.46% increase in dog intakes this year over last year. And cats, we are again exceeding last year actually tipping closer to where we were in 2023 when we had that large scale cat hoarding case in 2023 that happened towards the end of April. So we're almost to the same numbers of cats, but with no hoarding case to kind of add those numbers. It's all kittens. Intake by jurisdiction. So again, just looking at it slightly differently. Overall, there's still a 70% increase in intake compared to last year at this time. With Thurston County being the majority of the animal intake at 66%. City of Olympia follows second place with 16% intake, then Lacey and Tumwater. Positive outcomes are still increasing, which is fantastic. So we have had over 600 adoptions already this year. We transferred 251 animals, and we returned to owner about 161. So still higher than the last 2 years, but still pretty static in the grand scheme of things overall.
So adoption is at 605 so far in five months.
Yes, in 5 months.
How much staff does that take?
Not enough.
It is a lot.
'Cause that sounds like a revolving door.
It is. It's a lot for our staff. If we did not have the help of volunteers, but increasingly more and more, it has become extremely burdensome on staff, both between intake and care as well as adoption, because all of our return to owner and adoption is facilitated through our front desk, who also handles all of our field calls, as well as all of our licensing and general informational calls.
Cause that sounds like a lot of kennel turnaround as well. Do we have enough? Are we at the standards?
So we're pretty close. If we continue to see the ongoing trend that we're seeing, staff could potentially be coming with a recommendation to add an animal care tech to help with some of that for next year, if we're continuing. But we're monitoring things closely. The good news is animals are moving through the system fast. It's only when it becomes stagnant that it really becomes burdensome for all the staff. When we have to maintain care for animals that are sitting, because that's when they get stressed. That's when they get sick. We are seeing a higher level of behavior issues, a lot of which is not necessarily at the fault of the dog, but more of the stress of the circumstances that they're in. Our kennels are not conducive to kind of alleviating the stress of what it is like being in kennels. That's one of the downfalls about being in this old building. Even with sound mitigation, when you go into one of those rooms, it's really loud. I will instantly get a notification from my phone saying that I've exceeded the decibel range just from going into the kennels. That's why all the staff have to wear hearing protection. But the dogs don't get that. They can see each other. Not to mention all the in and out, those cause pressure changes that the dogs can feel.
Right.
And so it does become a very stressful place for animals to be, which does increase safety risks because handling dogs that are stressed and scared can sometimes react by biting. But we are trying to ensure everything that we can. Our veterinarian prescribes medications to help with stress at the shelter and alleviate some of those symptoms. We are working on a new behavior enrichment program to help. But still the best solution in this case is moving them through the system as quickly as possible, or having more foster homes willing to take on these large dogs to give them a break.
Okay, numbers are up.
So I did want to talk a little bit about our decision-making process when it comes to moving animals through the system, and that. Oh. Peter, I'm so sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I just now raised up my hand. Can you back up one slide, please? No, the one with the graph.
Oh, this one?
This one. So on the average, do you know ballpark the number of days that a dog stays in the system before they are adopted out?
We were just talking about this.
Yeah, I'd have to run it again to be sure, but it's usually around 10 days.
So 10 days. So far, for the 5 months, we have 605 adoptions. So you would say then, or rather, what, in terms of the process, adoption process, how long does that take? How many hours? I'm trying to figure out if a staff is needed to help out.
So we've made our adoption process as simple as possible. The actual paperwork itself can take a minimum 20 minutes. Could take longer if there's any questions or anything like that. The issue becomes, and again, it's not an issue, it's expected from our community. They want to come in and they want to meet and spend time with the animals. So the paperwork portion isn't the issue. And it could be upwards of an hour, hour and a half for an adopter to meet and spend time with each of the dogs. That's somebody, thankfully, usually a volunteer pulling those dogs out of a kennel, but not always. Sometimes it's animal care staff being pulled from the back to bring animals forward for potential adopters to meet, interact, learn. If those potential adopters have dogs that they would like to introduce this dog to see if they have the potential to get along. All of that takes time. So while our paperwork is as short and as sweet as possible, it's the human interaction time and the dog to human interaction time. And even the cat to human interaction time, although probably not as intensive, because usually somebody who's adopting a cat, they want to spend time with it, pet it, make sure like it's what they want. They might want to meet a couple of kitties, but we were usually not doing meet and greets between kitties or meet and greets between dog and kitties, right? So it's really the dogs that are more labor intensive as far as time and manpower.
Okay, so then if I hear you correctly,
Also,
based upon the human contact, I'm sorry, so we would say maybe about 5 to maybe 2 hours in terms of interacting with the dog. And is
Yeah,
that is
it could
that
be
one contact or multiple contact?
It takes about around an hour, could be more per potential adopter.
Okay,
Uh,
all right.
so it again, and it could go longer if they want to meet more than one dog.
Okay.
But it's about an hour per adopter. So and sometimes the issue that comes with that is that's not a guaranteed adoption. They could meet that dog and decide no. And so we've had staff spending 30 minutes to an hour with this one family, with this one dog, which again is totally appropriate and fair because we want to make sure that they're making informed decisions.
Yep.
But that's still, we only have so many hours in a day.
So then, Mr. Chairman or President, it looked like us having a dedicated half-time, full-time person to that position could be in order. If we have 605 adoptions in 5 months, so you think you have that's 200 adoption every 150, 130 day about?
Yeah,
Passing out?
it's just about 120 adoptions a month currently.
Okay. So 120 a month, and then you figure 1 hour, 2 hours, so that's almost a full-time 80 hours for of regular staff. So if we dedicate a half-time personnel to do that, so that would free up other staff to do other stuff, that might be, I mean, fair, I think.
So earlier you were saying another technician, and then that would free up a staff person to assume some of the other roles.
Yeah, because the animal care techs not only provide care, but they're a lot of times, if the front desk isn't available, they're the ones bringing animals up. But again, we're still in the tracking data phase for that. I want to make sure we're making an informed decision when we do that type of ask to the jurisdictions and what our plan would be. So there is no formal ask at this time, just more of a like, if trends continue the way they are, projections for the 2026 budget are more likely to be higher, just even from supplies.
So it's under control right now, but come
Correct.
Q3 or it's middle of Q4, there could be a decision to make.
And I think we're also balancing that though with, previous budgets, we have been using reserves. And so kind of drawing back on that's another thing we need to contemplate with the jurisdictions of what that looks like in addition to new staffing requests.
We want to be very practical and judicious with our decisions when it comes to increasing more budget when it comes to staff.
So after we get the Q3 numbers, we can get kind of a clear picture of the trend line continuing to rise, and maybe we can look at.
Potentially, and there might be a few other factors in play coming up here in the next few months that should be able to help us as far as funding, so.
And then this also takes into account the new contracts. So is Nisqually bringing in some now, or is that?
Some, yeah, but they're not, again, significant to the 4 jurisdictions as far as the number of animals. They are a small percentage.
Okay.
Bucota is a very small percentage because it's a very small jurisdiction.
Okay, so our influx is not necessarily.
It's not due to the addition of contracts, it's overall just.
We're just growing, we're bigger. We're over 400,000 people now.
Yeah, it's our county is bigger. Which means there's more animals,
Yep.
so.
So Peter, what we'll do is after we get the Q3 numbers,
Mhm.
we'll revisit this conversation.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
So I was just gonna add, for maybe the benefit of the public who may be watching, when we're talking about the average of, a 10-day first stay and time too, just maybe a little bit more too on some of the holds you all have to do for certain animals, as well as some of the medical care. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Absolutely. Andrew is gonna be your guy for that one.
So there are 2 general holds that we will end up doing on animals. So a stray animal that comes in would have a 48-hour hold excluding Sundays and holidays. Which is where we would post that animal on our website. We would do the missing animal hotline, post their pictures on our front door so that hopefully the owners will come and get those animals. The other hold that we do is a 4-day hold, and that is if somebody is incapacitated. And so through municipal code, that is somebody who is either arrested or has a medical emergency, and we get called out by either PD or fire or something like that. We respond and the animal's there and they need us to take it. And so then that animal would come in and be held for 4 days, excluding Sundays and holidays, before we would move them anywhere in the process. After those holds expire, we would then schedule them for our next surgery day, assuming the owners have not come forward. We are currently doing surgery 2 days a week, which would be on Tuesdays and Fridays. And so they would go to the next available date after their hold period. So sometimes that's really quick. If they came in, let's say on Thursday and their hold expired on Saturday, they would be going to surgery on Tuesday. Sometimes that would be kicked out almost a week. And then they would have surgery. They would need to recover overnight. And then the soonest they could go home would be the following day. They could be available during that time period. So after the stray hold has finished or the incapacitation hold has finished, they could still be available prior to surgery. So they could find an adopter. The animal would stay with us until the surgery was completed, and then the adopter would come back and actually finalize the adoption and pay for the adoption after all the surgery was completed. And so realistically, if everything happens really quickly and we find an adopter really quickly, the soonest an animal would go home is probably 4 to 6 days. And so that 10-day window is really quick when you think about the fact that people are coming and looking for animals on a regular basis and finding them and they're leaving relatively quickly. That is down over the last couple of years for us because of bringing medical in-house. Whereas prior, we would have to try to call and find a spot for them in the neighborhood, one of the neighborhood vets, and sometimes those animals would stay with us and it would increase our length of stay by days, sometimes weeks. And so, yeah, so our 10-day length of stay for dogs is really good for us. Cats is longer because usually cats come to us at a much younger age and aren't ready for surgery. And so they're usually with us for a couple of weeks before they get to a place where they can have surgery.
Also keep in mind, in 2019, when I just got here, our length of stay was between 4 and 6 weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, moving it in-house was probably the thing that's really helped us the most.
Correct. Because a lot of times we were also waiting for dentals, waiting for, even when we were doing elected surgeries like an eye removal or an amputation, we would still have to book that with the vet externally and then wait for that appointment to come. So the length of stay has greatly reduced. And just for clarification, because I know sometimes there can be some confusion when we talk about length of stay. It's not that they only have 10 days and then we're euthanizing them.
Right.
That's just the
They
average,
think that, I don't think.
it's for any public who's listening.
Okay.
It's just the average stay that somebody has here, like a hotel, right? It's like the average room they've booked is 10 days here with us. So overall, we're doing great. The idea, like the more successful we are, the more reduced length of stay that we have, because it means we're just moving them very quickly through. One of the other ways that we're helping with this summer is we're actually adding a third surgery day twice a month to help keep moving some of those animals through the system, especially during kitten season. And the decision was made to that. It's the money that would have normally been paid that we would utilize Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic, which is a low-cost spay neuter clinic in Tacoma. Instead of the staff time that it was taking to drive those animals to Northwest Spay Neuter, pay those fees, come back, we're actually saving money by bringing a whole team in-house is actually cost reduction overall.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was thinking about while you were talking about was transportation costs. Nice reduction.
So part of the decision-making process that we're doing within that, we'll just say 10 days for simplicity. So these are the things that we're looking at for all animals the moment that they enter the shelter system. So we are taking things into account such as resources. That means staffing, that means volunteers, that means surgical capacity, that means a more holistic approach. When I say resources, it's not just monetary. It's also the actual human resources, supplies, all of that taking into account. What does our staffing look like? We're currently down 1 animal care tech that we're hiring for, so we only have 3 animal care techs right now. Kennels, when I say kennels, I'm talking about how many do we have open? So are we full? Do we have 6 kennels open? Do we have any that we know are leaving that day because they've been reclaimed by an owner or have been adopted? How many animals are coming in? What has field already told us about that we need to be aware of? What's already on the schedule? And then, like I said, animals moving out. So who do we know is leaving that day? Part of how we accomplish that is through daily rounds. So we have 6 team members that are designated to do rounds, our medical team, and then Andrew, who operations, our Sierra, our animal welfare and field manager, and then our positive outcomes coordinator, Becca, and then Megan, our volunteer and outreach coordinator, are all part of people who do daily rounds. We are looking at overall health of the animal. So how are they doing? Did they come in sick? Do they look like they have kennel cough? Do they need treatment? What does their stress look like? Are we noticing any behavior? Did they come in really scared and shut down? Do we need to spend some time working with them? And kind of making that overall assessment then holistically with all of the resources that we have and coming up with a plan. Because one of the reasons for daily rounds is we don't want animals getting lost in the system. And lost in the system means they're just sitting here and all of a sudden we're like, this animal's been here for 3 weeks. Like, why? Why are they still here? And so once we're taking all of that into account, we make a plan. And so our plans happen during our pathway planning meetings. We call them at-risk meetings. And that is because we literally want to make sure we have eyes and ears and are consistently aware of any animals that might be at risk to eventually be euthanized. And when I say eventually be euthanized, I mean more in the sense of, let's say that highly reactive dog who's really stressed, he's spinning in his kennel, he's chewing on his tail, he's jumping around and barking, which looks really scary for an adopter in a kennel, but really he's stressed, right? So what is the plan for him? We know if we don't do something, he could be at risk of euthanasia down the road because of kennel stress and decompensating in our care, right? So that plan looks like maybe we're putting him on anxiety medications. Maybe Becca is posting them to foster. Maybe we sign them up for our Champion Dog program, which is a specialized group of volunteers who give extra time and attention to these dogs. Do we do a social media post? Is this dog a candidate to be posted to rescue? Those are all things that we're taking into consideration, making sure that this animal does not stay here and moves through the system. We also do this medically. So we're looking at what we can handle medically, what we have the resources to handle, how long is the care going to be? Is this a skin issue that's going to take 3 months in our care before it's healed enough that we feel comfortable adopting it? Or is this something that a rescue is better suited to take and handle? Those are all things that we are looking at. And these meetings happen twice a week. There has to be a quorum. So this is a committee. There has to be a quorum of 3 people. There is required attendees. And so we always have somebody from leadership, operations, field, volunteer, positive outcomes, veterinary care, and animal care, so that we're taking holistic consideration. So what is animal care observing about this animal? What has the medical team observed about this animal? What has our positive outcomes coordinator done? Have they posted it to foster? What have been the reactions? Has there been any interest in foster? All of these discussions are taking place regularly. Peter.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. So it seems like you're describing an intake process for when you receive an animal. Or let me rephrase that. So the animal is already in the system, and this is just the intake system with which you determine what the course of treatment ought to be.
Correct. We're at these meetings, we're planning their pathways, right? So from intake, whether they were owner surrender or a stray or a field case, we are making sure that they have a path out of the shelter. So is that path going to be put on the adoption floor? Is that path going to be put into foster and then adoption? Is it going to be path going to go to rescue? Those are all things that we're taking into consideration. So this animal has a path from the moment it comes into our door. We know where it's going. In some cases, euthanasia is that pathway. And I want to explain, because some of this, there are things that are euthanasias in our case. For example, if a dog has been deemed dangerous, we're the ones who make that designation as animal control. That dog is not an adoption candidate. with us after we have designated them dangerous because they are a safety and liability issue. And we are also charged with public safety. So in that case, if an owner surrendered that dog after it had been deemed dangerous by us, his pathway is euthanasia. But that's not the only pathway for the majority of the animals coming through our system. This is to ensure that we're being transparent. So all of these notes are actually put into our shelter management system. All of our staff can see them at any time. We have volunteers that attend these and also give their input. Especially if there's an animal that they would like to advocate for or understand the decision-making process and how we make decisions, they are always welcome to attend. And so this is the best way for us to be as transparent as possible, but also so that the decisions aren't falling on one single person at the shelter. It's not falling just on me to make all euthanasia decisions at the shelter, or on Andrew, or on Dr. Swearingen.
Right, there's a consensus.
Correct. There are times that it is written into our protocol that I do, as the director, have veto power. But that's very rarely used, and I'm more of a tiebreaker if the team is split for any reason. But that is very, very minimal. The majority of the time, the team is, I hate to be repetitive, in majority for whatever decision that we have made. And some of them, like I said, the decision is even to continue monitoring, and let's try a social media post. Let's see if we can get this dog into foster for a break. We're really trying to advocate and make sure that these animals not just have a pathway, but don't get lost in in the system. And that also it's really, I feel, cleared things with the staff who felt like it was ambiguous decision-making prior to implementing this. So this has actually been in effect for 2 years now. So prior to that, the staff did feel like sometimes decisions were ambiguous, even if they were not. And this way they are a part of the process. They can help us figure out solutions, but then also see reasons for decisions in the long run.
Gotcha.
Did I miss anything?
If I can add something.
Sure.
Recently, our positive outcomes coordinator, Becca, put together and has very much been pushing 2 programs that are part of what's going towards the positive outcomes. We have our day foster program, which incentivizes our current volunteers and fosters, as well as City of Lacey employees, to come and take a pup for a day. We'll supply you with everything from poop bags to an Adopt Me slip on a leash. And then we also have our Weekend Warrior program, same thing, but it's a pickup for over the weekend. So just a couple of things that are coming down the chute that'll be a positive outcome for our dogs.
Thank you.
Moving on from shelter, we have our field calls. As you can see across the board, we are up. We are continually having an increase of calls month over month. And we are now just heading into our busy season for calls. This is what the calls look like by jurisdiction currently. Thurston County is just under half, while Olympia again is second with 25% of calls, then Lacey and Tumwater. But as you can see across the board, we've had an increase of calls per jurisdiction. However, Lacey is actually the least increase in calls this year. And that is it for statistics.
Hey. Thank you, Sarah. Next item on our agenda is volunteer program update, and looks like Megan McKay will be presenting. She is our volunteer and outreach coordinator.
I will
Megan.
pull it up and then I will bring you the mouse.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for having me. I apologize for my tardiness. I hit bumper to bumper traffic on I-5, so that was not fun, but I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So this is an update from when I was here about a year ago. I have been with Joint Animal Services for just over a year now. So it's just getting everyone back up to speed. My position as volunteer and outreach coordinator oversees 3 separate programs. I oversee our volunteers, our outreach, and our humane education. So that's what I'm gonna be presenting on today. So a little bit of an overview of what we will be going over, and then a very cute picture of Bruce, who got adopted by his foster home. So for volunteers, we will be going over enrichment volunteers. Sarah has touched on our Champion Dog program. Also, some new outreach events that we have attended and are going to be attending, and then an update on humane education. So with our volunteer program, we are expanding in multiple ways, and the 2 I wanted to highlight today were our enrichment volunteers and our Champion Dog program. So with our enrichment volunteers, this was proposed to me by Andrew earlier this year, that it would be great to have volunteers coming in to specifically make toys for animals in our care. Our animal care team is already busy enough doing all of the other care. So it's great to have a team come in and do things like braid together some fleece and make cat toys. Take some tennis balls, you cut them in half, and then you put some treats in it. You take a cereal box, you put treats in a cereal box, and then you put it back together. Very simple, fun things that volunteers love to do. So I have had an organization reach out to me with some volunteers who have varying abilities, and I thought, what a great opportunity to launch this program. So we currently have 2 enrichment volunteers who are coming in, they're each coming in twice a month, and then a 3rd one from that group who's in the process right now. They're applying to volunteer. So far, we have had them for about 2 months. And a lot of it is just getting stuff ready for our animal care techs to hand out to the animals. What is the new development is one of our animal care techs, Tegan, has been taking over our groom room and has been giving it a facelift. So we're also gonna have enrichment supplies in there. And her and I are creating a binder of supplies. So in theory, a volunteer could walk in, have their station in the groom room, make everything they need, hand it out, and then we're getting those animals that mental enrichment that they need. So a lot of the times, and I've had conversations with volunteers about this, we focus on the physical health, and the physical dogs have to run, they have to go for a walk. That's true, but they burn a lot of calories already in their kennels. They're jumping, they're biting their tail, everything Sarah's talked about. So it's that mental enrichment that we really need to think about. So Becca has also been making our positive outcomes coordinator has been making a binder that goes into details of how Regional Services of King County does their enrichment. And so we're essentially very grateful for them to building this program, and we're making a Joint Animal Services version. Champion Dog Program are our volunteers working with the dogs that are at risk. So in the office that Becca and I share, we have a whiteboard, and it will say the dogs that are on our CDP list, Champion Dog Program list, and where they're located in the shelter, their kennel number. And it's a responsibility of those CDP Champion Dog Program volunteers to work with those dogs. And then they submit notes to our shelter software, and then they're also invited to our at-risk meetings. So when I began last April, we had 3 members who were CDP, and now we're up to 8. So we're constantly expanding. And so we have at least 1 person coming in every day of the week. And so we want to make sure that ball keeps rolling.
And just to interrupt for 1 second, the reason why it's a smaller group is because it takes a lot more training for them to become a Champion Dog program. They go through a lot of dog behavior and handling training before they're released into this program.
Yeah, your everyday volunteer who works with our dogs is only working on the adoption floor, and then they need to do an advanced training to work on our strays, because the strays are just a bit of a mystery to us, and we're also might be housing some dogs that have different behaviors. So yeah, exactly what Sarah said. And something that we just implemented last month that we will be doing on a monthly basis is a grief group, specifically for our Champion Dog Program volunteers. So we had 5 members show up last month, which is pretty good out of 8 for a first time. And we just talked about, we sat for 2 hours and we talked about everything from essentially what Sarah went over. How do we make decisions? What does that look like from an animal walking into the shelter to then having a decision at an at-risk meeting? So we talked through the process. We printed out what the papers look like for our meetings. And because not everyone can come to the meetings themselves, even though they are invited. And so we talked about why. We talked about certain animals that were harder decisions. We talked about the reason. We talked about how medical plays in. And sometimes they don't always have the ability to have a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Swearingen. We talked a lot about the foster pitches that Becca does, foster pitches, and then also transfer pleas. And so what we learned is that the key is just communication, communication, communication. No one knows what they don't know. So we took the feedback that we were given, which essentially they just wanted to know why. And so one thing that Becca has done moving forward is in our shelter software, she realized that the volunteers didn't have access to see when she was doing pleas. So they had no idea that she was reaching out to other organizations. So she put it in the notes section instead. So now it's verified that they can know what's going on. So there's a tiny little change that we're doing. So we'll be doing that on a monthly basis, just touching base on those harder decisions and getting feedback.
So this is designed for volunteers and employees to
It's
potentially grieve some of the decisions that are made, okay, to help them move on.
exactly. And a lot of what we talk about in this industry is compassion fatigue. We all tend to kind of hit our point and then things kind of go numb. And that's not the best way to care for the animals. And it's not the best way to care for ourselves. So we talk about things like coping mechanisms. We give out resources. I talk a lot about like having rituals, like as someone who is trained in euthanasia and does perform euthanasia at the shelter, and just how do we cope with those things. So it's a lot of those like raw moments of being emotional and being vulnerable and hoping that that leads to these volunteers feeling safe and then also leads to them staying.
And that's a new program?
Mm-hmm.
And how long has it been in effect?
She just had her first one.
Mm-hmm.
It was inspired, Megan was one of the staff that we sent to the Animal Care Expo, and they had a workshop about grief groups.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great way to humanize the staff as well. It's real easy to create a narrative in your head when you don't know, right? Like the
Oh, yeah.
white noise becomes your own narrative in your head when you don't
No,
know all
we're-
the answers or know what's going on.
We're good at jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's they can share their joint grief, because usually if a volunteer is sad about a euthanasia decision, I can guarantee you there's staff members that are sad about it as well. And so it's a great way to be cathartic and bond with each other.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys found time and resources to do this.
Oops. Alrighty, and then the other thing that we have started is our animal cruelty response volunteers. So of the amount of volunteers that we have 15 total. 6 of them were current volunteers or fosters, and then 9 completely new folks to join animal services. So I thought that was pretty exciting that we were able to get some current and then some new folks. So just this last Saturday, what is today, 2 days ago? Wow. We were in this exact conference room and did a presentation. There is a sergeant from Regional Animal Services of King County who came from the Washington Animal Fighting Task Force and did a presentation for us all about what to look for. And it was great. We had a Lacey officer come. We had Tumwater officer as well. And then some of our volunteers and then some staff as well. So we're just building this program that's very new to this area and really trying to make sure that everyone has tools in their tool belt.
Awesome. So we're reaching out to other jurisdictions saying, hey, what are you guys doing for success? Just like other jurisdictions, like I think you said it was in Cowlitz County, somewhere in Vancouver, and they wanted to kind of understand how we.
Yes, Clark County. Longview.
Longview. We were able to help them.
Yes.
So yeah, it's great. It's also just great that people know who we are.
I will say too, This program has actually picked up speed nationally. We've been recognized by a couple of national groups for the innovation of this idea.
And then we have our outreach. I love outreach. Outreach is essentially going out and being in the public. So with our events, we attended 7 events in the summer of last year, and then we have 9 scheduled for this year. So a couple that have been really exciting that we did a Colvin Ranch Day, which is a new area for us, hadn't been out there as an organization. And usually it's a mix of people going, oh my gosh, who are you? And then a mix of people being like, oh my gosh, I've adopted from you. And so I get to talk about who we are. A lot of people don't know we exist. You know, they still think of us as the Pound on Martin Way. And so I get to talk about how we're a shelter, and sheltering is a verb. That's what we're doing. And so it's exciting for me. And then we also have the All-American Jubilee in Rainier that's coming around the corner. So what I do is I try very hard to send as many emails as I can in the spring to events in the area and just really get our name out there. So we also have Tumwater Dog Days is coming up. So I believe that's this upcoming Saturday. So definitely come out.
How would you find All-American Jubilee?
How did I find it?
How would you define that?
How would I define it?
Yeah, like how does that work? Because I have to give a report.
Yes.
So if I say, oh, we're doing All-American Jubilee, people don't know.
From my limited understanding, not having been to this event myself, I believe it's like a semi 4th of July type of festival that we'll have an information booth at. And so we bring, oh gosh, a whole ton of stuff. I always have something to get the kids to the table. So it's usually crayons and coloring. That helps a lot. Stickers are a big deal too. And then we also have some really fun, we have 2 different sized dogs, stuffed dogs and a cat that are all microchipped that we can take to events. We can show the importance of microchipping. They also all have spay scars. So we can talk about spaying and neutering. And then there's different handouts. One of my favorite is we have emergency stickers that I give out to people for windows in cars and homes. They're bright orange, so first responders can see right away if their pet's in the home. So there's so many things that like you don't think about until you're a pet parent or you're in animal welfare. And so it's a lot of information. Pet first aid is another big handout that we give out. And then information about spay neuter services and what our spay neuter services are in the county.
So for each one of these, we take our booth, we set it up, we give out information, and make sure that our name is in that community, in that area. If you need something, give us a call. And so that's true for Colvin Ranch Day, All-American Jubilee, and the third one that you were covering?
Yes, we have Tumwater Dog Days is coming up this Saturday.
And we're also participating in the Juneteenth celebration.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So
thought so.
maybe just, we could get the whole list out to all of the commissioners of all of the events
Sure.
you have planned and the locations. I think
Oh,
that might
definitely.
be very helpful to show kind of the diversity across the jurisdictions that make up joint animal services.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out too, that these are just like summer events that she's doing. Last year we did 25 outreach events, which basically equivalates to one every other week.
Yeah.
You know, when
Month.
you break it out, it's basically, you know, it's crunch time, right? Like the majority of our events are happening spring, summer, fall.
Yep.
But I mean, if you were to bring that out, it's technically we're doing an event of some sort, whether it's an adoption event at a business or one of our information booths. We're literally out in the community twice a month.
Yeah, this photo is actually from a pop-up market that was done in our parking lot. The lady that is holding the sign, her name is Renee. She owns a coffee stand. And so that's an event that we did in October. So you just never know what's gonna happen. Alrighty, and then humane education. So I touched on some of this stuff when it came to our craft toys. The photo above was a really big hit. Those are picture frames. So with humane education, there is a program that I created with the Lacey Library, just around the corner, called Animal Allies Club. So Animal Allies Club is now in 2 libraries. We are in Lacey and we are in Yelm. And once a month, we get together and we do a mix of education where I'll do a mini presentation, we'll do some videos, and then we will either make a toy like the cat rope, or we'll make a picture frame like above. And we focus a lot on animal behavior. We also focus on different kinds of animals. So just recently, 2 weeks ago, I was in Yelm and we did a critters day. And so we had them watch a bunch of videos about critters. Just last week in Lacey, we had an organization, Northwest Beaver Foundation, I believe, came and did a presentation for us. And they brought some really cool stuff like a skull, and they talked all about beavers. So it's a mix of things. It's a mix of me being there and support with the librarians, and then also having other organizations around. And a lot of it is just being there for the kids to know, how do you take care of animals? A lot of the times you don't know, or you don't necessarily see examples in your household. So we talk about also just really basic things like, what do dogs eat? What are dog breeds? What do cats like? How can you tell if a cat's unhappy? So it's a wide variety of programming. But that's what our human.
This is geared towards youth, or is it just?
It's elementary school kids is where it's geared towards. The youngest kiddos we get are probably about 5, and the older end is about 12.
Okay.
So we gear it towards that age group. So it is definitely more on the elementary school side. So big fan of the Dodo Kids YouTube channel. That makes an appearance every week. It's great and educational. So yeah. And then we love numbers. So here are some of our statistics. So with our volunteers, our current projection right now is that we're retaining, which is one of my favorite words as someone who oversees a volunteer program. Retention is one of the hardest things to tackle in the volunteer world because there's so much change and turnover. And another thing that is really interesting is that volunteers in Washington State are valued at $40 an hour. So I also put up there how much money those volunteer hours would be. So far, just this year, that is over $113,000. And then I also just went over how we have those 2 new events so far in 2025, and then the dates associated with our Lacey Library event starting October of last year, and then Yelm being February of this year. This is something that's in the works that I already touched on earlier because I was very excited, but this is our enrichment program for the in-kennel enrichment. So that just means that the enrichment is happening while the animal is in the kennel. So I talked a little bit about the toys. Some other things that we'll be looking at is scent. That can be a really great thing. And then of course treats. So there's high value treats. I talk a lot about, you can take an apple, you core it, put peanut butter in it, freeze it, and you have a Kong with no cleanup.
Nice.
So yep, some options like that. So I know that there's been a freezer that's been ordered that will go into that groom room, and we'll be able to do things like that and other high value treats.
Are you looking forward to the day when we have a larger facility and maybe some green areas surrounding it?
I dream.
Okay.
Any questions?
Can you bring up the rest of the participants, see if we have any comments or questions?
Sorry, the mouse was having a mind of its own there for 1 minute.
I don't see any comments or questions, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is our low-cost spay neuter discussion. Sarah?
So as the commission remembers, we had kind of a very lively but brief discussion about spay neuter. And so I thought we would spend a little bit more time taking a deeper dive into low-cost spay neuter services, not only in Thurston County, but in Washington State as a whole. So just to get an understanding of access to care. Understanding the veterinary crisis. So there are multiple factors that are playing into this. We have rising costs of care, the veterinary workforce shortage. There's geographic disparities, meaning significantly there is less veterinary care in rural areas or low-income urban areas than there are in higher income and city urbaninscapes. Transportation to clinics is also a huge barrier. And then lack of financial assistance. So we have also seen an increase in rising costs in veterinary care. And these are all playing a part in this current veterinary crisis. So when I talk about access to care, access to care actually refers to the ability of owners to obtain timely, appropriate, and affordable veterinary services for their animals. This includes not only physical access to veterinary facilities, but also in consideration of cost, availability, and other barriers such as transportation and communication. So we currently nationwide have an access to care problem. People do not have access to affordable veterinary care. Some of those barriers to veterinary care: cost, language, culture, geography, transportation, lack of accommodations for people needing to make appointments, time of day, fear of judgment. So there's lots of fear and stigma around what you may choose to do and not do with your vet or with your pet if making recommendations or perhaps care you have not given prior to coming. Sources of information, there's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation out there. And also people just don't always know.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So, we adopted from JASCOM, and I remember we had an insurance policy on this dog, right? And I didn't know if we got that from somebody's suggestion at JASCOM, like, hey, this is available if you want to buy it. I know the insurance care seemed better than mine, or maybe it was just my wife was taking him all the time and, well, he has to take one of these, wrap it in some peanut butter, whatever. Is pet insurance an affordable thing these days?
Pet insurance can help overall costs, but again, it's a luxury for somebody who can afford a monthly payment to pay into that. Depending on the type of health insurances there can be lots of restrictions, one-time uses. Just like regular insurance, there can be like pre-diagnosed stuff that's not covered. So you, just like when you're looking at your own insurance, you do have to kind of look at the fine print in that as well. Because not all pet insurances are created equal. There are a lot of employers now that is one of the benefits is you can opt in to pet insurance. And it does help, right? Like it does help just like human insurance helps. But again, it's that luxury of being able to afford that monthly payment to begin with, or even still the ability to pay those deductibles, right?
I would imagine we probably couldn't say, hey, here's some good.
So Washington State, we're actually not permitted to
Hearing.
do any kind of pet insurance. For example, when we signed on to Pet Point, they have microchips and they also have a pet insurance. And technically, with that, you can have 30 days free pet health insurance, but it is, except for the state of Washington. That is not a program that can be offered here.
Okay. So people can buy pet in the
Yep.
state of Washington, they can buy it.
You can buy it, we just
can't
can't.
steer them to it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So there's also financial sustainability of practice, right? So on the veterinary end, veterinarians still have to make enough money to pay their staff and to pay retirement and to pay unemployment and benefits if they offer it. They have to buy equipment and supplies, their own personal finances, work-life balance and stress, perception of care standards. implicit bias, and also fear of litigation is, is something that veterinarians have to face. Did I cover everything? Vicky? Ish?
I could go on.
Yeah. We're summarizing. But these are all factors that play into this when we're talking about accessing veterinary care, and it is on both ends. So there is a website, that is the access to care. That actually, the latest scores were in 2021, so please keep this in mind. Things have changed since then, and I would actually argue probably not for the better. I would say our score is probably lower.
As a state?
As a state and as a county, we're gonna cover the county too. Because there is a perception that it looks like we have really great access to care here in Thurston County, which is just not accurate.
Because green is good.
Green is good. But overall, Washington only has an accessibility score of 44 out of 100. And so that's one of the larger statewide issues that we are facing is there are several counties that have very little, if no, access to veterinary care. Or because some of these counties are so large, like Okanagan, they may have a couple of veterinary clinics there, but someone may have to drive 3 hours to get to one. And that's a hard ask for a lot of people, right? And so when you narrow down and look at ours, so currently in 2021, we had a rating of 83. But what this doesn't actually consider is that rising cost of care. So when this was measured in 2021, this was before inflation really hit.
Yeah.
And this was right when the veterinary crisis really just was at its peak, where veterinarians were leaving, nobody could get in. And so this I feel like is very skewed. And it would probably be much lower if it was reevaluated today when factoring in cost of care and veterinary clinics.
What's the evaluation cycle? 5?
That is an excellent question that I don't know, because this is a separate organization that does this. And so I don't know what their cycle is. But it is helpful, at least when you're looking at some of these, trying to kind of figure out where those gaps are. But again, so much has changed in 4 years, that this is no longer fully accurate. While we have the clinics, they estimate we have about 36 clinics, which isn't far off. When I Googled clinics in Thurston County, I feel like I counted closer to like 28 or 30. But it's really the cost of care that can be quite burdensome for our community.
So maybe you're gonna get to this in the next slide. When you said 36, are you talking about Thurston County or Washington State?
36 just veterinary clinics in Thurston County, but that's private practice.
It's 4 owners.
That's literally one. That's 4 owners. The other issue that's coming into play here is that there are very few privately owned veterinary clinics anymore. When they were privately owned veterinary clinics, veterinarians could make those decisions to reduce a cost for somebody or create a payment plan for somebody who's been their client for 20 years, right? Because they knew them and they knew their animal. But corporations have really, in my opinion, preyed on veterinarians and the fact that a veterinarian is not, and excuse me if I'm speaking out of context, but I believe veterinarians are not given any business classes in veterinary school, or very few.
You can get actually an MBA now, but most of us are just focused on clinical medicine, and we went into clinical medicine because we hate business.
Yeah. So you have these corporations coming in saying, hey, we'll not only purchase your practice from you, so we're gonna give you money, we're gonna buy your business, we're gonna pay you a salary to practice. We'll handle all the HR stuff and the hiring and your retirement and your benefits. We'll handle all of this. But in turn, we set all the prices. We mandate that you have a sales amount that you must meet. You can have a portion of that.
So you
but
become an employee,
Yep, you become an employee and those decisions are taken away from you.
sounds about capitalist.
I would say the one exception to that is Dr. Murphy, who is on, as far as a businessman, he is in the top 1%, you know, so it can be done, but it's not done very often.
But even Dr. Murphy sold his practices too, so.
So are you better off starting off with a degree in business and then going into care? Is that what I'm hearing here?
If you were to do it over again, Vicky,
Oh, God, no, I would have done internship and become a specialist. So, then I even more sit in my little ivory tower with, you know, business decisions being made. Yeah.
so I mean, it really creates a perfect storm, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you as a practice owner, sell your practice, but you can still do what you were trained to do without having to handle any of the back end?
Yeah, from the outside looking in, it looks,
Correct. But again, it's really increased prices and there is no leeway anymore to kind of make individualized decisions based on your client that you're caring for.
gotcha.
So access to low-cost spay neuter. There is a great map, and if anybody's interested, I'm more than happy to send the link so you guys can see the map and all the resources. But when you break it down, there is 20 whole clinics in Western Washington that do low-cost spay neuter. And then 16 whole clinics in Eastern Washington. And Eastern Washington is basically, in this definition, is anything on the other side of the Cascades.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, but also
But it's
not. It's not, right? Like,
Absolutely correct.
It looks like we have a hand raised.
Kelly.
Kelly,
Uh,
so thank you.
Thanks. Just a quick question on for this, how do they define a low cost spay neuter clinic?
So these are all specifically nonprofit clinics that is mission, or what you will say mission is to provide low cost services to the public.
So basically, they're kind of doing this at cost.
Correct. Yeah, these are shelters that have a clinic that also provide low cost. These are also separate low cost clinics. A couple of those, for example, would be Feral Cat Project or Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic are examples. Mason County Humane Society has their own separate clinic. So it can be a mixture, but all of these as defined are not privately owned clinics. These are all nonprofit clinics that are operating to provide services. So when you zoom in a little bit more for Thurston County, we have no low-cost clinic in Thurston County. The two closest clinics for us is Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic in Tacoma, which is a 30-minute drive, or you can drive an hour and a half to 2 hours to Mason County Humane Society up in Belfair. Those are our two closest clinics. There are only 4 programs currently, technically 3 right now. We have SNAP, which is Spay Neuter Assistance Program. Joint Animal Services hands out those vouchers every month. There's a total of 30 to 40 vouchers, depending on grant money, that we disperse for SNAP. You have to be low income to qualify for this one.
Yeah, I remember you said people line up early and
Yep,
the line gets long.
yep, it sure does. The line is longer than we have vouchers for. Thurston County Humane Society was doing a voucher program as well. That is currently on hold as they're reevaluating their program and the effectiveness of vouchers as a whole. Because again, it's vouchers to private clinics in this community. So the fees that they are paying are more than what they might be able to do, for instance, if they were to hire a MASH clinic to come down. Like that fee might be, they might be able to have more surgeries provided in that instance than the voucher program. So they're reevaluating their program and what is the best use of their money. So currently, Instead of the normal 70 vouchers we were getting a month, between SNAP and Thurston County Humane Society, we're now down to 30 to 40.
So I have a question. Is a low-cost spay neuter program or facility, is that something that is created intentionally like that, or is it something that became that?
It created intentionally. So there is a formula and a business plan that is centered around being able to at least break even when providing services. If not, being in the black, when done correctly, you can be in the black and reinvest that money back in to providing services. But it is a very intentional thing. There are hard and soft costs, and there's a certain number of spay neuters as well as other services like vaccines that you need to provide in a day in order to break even.
And are these typically started privately or publicly or both?
Privately as a nonprofit.
Probably as a nonprofit.
Sir, do you mind explaining what a MASH clinic is?
Yes, so sorry. Thank you. A MASH clinic versus a mobile spay neuter clinic. So a mobile spay neuter clinic is a vehicle that's actually built to provide surgeries within the vehicle, almost like a motorhome, right? Or an RV. A MASH clinic is actually set up in a way where all the supplies are in a truck, but you can actually perform the surgeries at different locations in a building. So for example, you could literally be doing, we could do them right here.
We may find a different location.
Booked days, guys.
I love the enthusiasm, Andrew, but we'll find another place.
Gymnasiums are great for this, and basically all the equipment is like packed with. You have multiple tables, you have everything, and you can basically set up on the fly in a building and perform them whenever needed. There's just certain parameters that are needing to be met, like access to bathrooms, things like that for the team that comes in to do that.
So is a MASH clinic typically something that's done like in a county? We service this county, or is it just kind of?
It all depends. It genuinely all depends. There's very few options right now. There's probably a handful of nonprofits that do MASH style clinics where they can just go wherever they're needed. But the issue is that because there's so few, they're so booked up. And so we could potentially schedule one for 6 months from now.
Come down and hang out with us.
Correct. And so continuing with that, like Concern for Animal also hands out vouchers for spay neuter as well as, I believe they pay for some veterinary care. And then Pasado Space Station, which is a mobile spay neuter clinic that is run by Pasado Safe Haven, has been starting to come down a couple times a year to Thurston County. They were originally only servicing King and Pierce County, and they have added Thurston County, but it's no more than 4 times a year.
Well, we're on the map.
Call it.
I'm trying to see
Super positive every Sunday.
To give you guys an idea of how many Thurston County residents are actually leaving Thurston County to get spay neuter, low cost spay neuter services. This is just 4 clinics by 3 different organizations. There's over 2,700 surgeries between these 4 clinic locations that were given to Thurston County residents last year. And so that's over.
Okay.
I would not say that is necessarily 2,700 residents because that's surgeries, right? So that could be a resident with multiple pets. So you're probably still looking though at anywhere between 1,800 and 2,000 of Thurston County residents had to physically leave our county to get services provided to them. Just from these 4 out of 20 clinics that are available on the Western Washington.
The phrasing of, and we're willing to, right? Because there's so many people that need those services that aren't willing to or able to go to those other clinics.
Because again, Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic being the closest is still 30 minutes away, so you need some form of transportation to get there. Pasado State Space Station, you know, this wasn't even including any of their Thurston County numbers because they just started. These were people who actually drove to Pierce County and King County to have their surgeries performed at their mobile clinic wherever they were stationed. And then Feral Cat Project, while only doing cats, they have 2 locations at Linwood and Renton that people are driving to have those surgeries done.
So that brings a question to mind. So being on a bus line, right? JASCOM's right on that bus line. Do people show up on with their animal and can get off the bus and come in?
People have adopted and taken them home. People have RTO'd and got on the bus, and gone home.
I think maybe just one thing to stress with this, and correct me if I'm wrong too, is it's not just potentially a drive up there. I mean, these do take time. And so you're also spending your day up there, or you're making a second return trip to pick up your animal. And so I think that should be taken into account of, it's not just a 30-minute drive,
Right.
it's extensive hours.
Correct. That would be an absolutely correct addition and assumption to that. And the further you get, it is the day. And for some of these, like Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic, their SOPs, I believe, depending on the species, it's an overnight stay. So you have to be committed to come and picking them up the next day before. So it's,
Okay. 2,782 surgeries.
so that's, it was just to kind of, these were clinics that could easily pull their numbers for me right away, just so we could conceptualize a little bit more, the number of surgeries that happened. And so this is just what we know about for 4 clinics out of 20.
Wow,
That's crazy.
that means that we have more work to do.
Correct, correct. So questions?
Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this presentation, and Sarah, I appreciate your communication around this issue, because I do oftentimes get constituents reaching out to me about spay neuter programs or other low-cost veterinary service programs. And one constituent in particular I followed through with from the beginning, saw it through all the way till the end, and they were able to finally get their pups taken care of over this last weekend using one of the SNAP vouchers. But one of my questions was, knowing that, you know, this one particular person's story really struck me, because they were trying to get a SNAP voucher for, I think, over a year. They were coming to animal services at the beginning of the month, every month. They were one of those people waiting in line, finally got their vouchers. And then none of the clinics that are available to take the vouchers actually had appointments from the time the voucher was issued until it expired. So they were running close to getting to that end date of their voucher being expired, and they were worried that they were going to have to start all over again. And it took consistent advocacy for their pets on almost a daily basis to make sure that they didn't fall through the cracks and they didn't have to start over again. And that barely was able to happen. Like, it was, the stars had to align to make that happen. And so I'm wondering, how do we know that? I mean, I know that that's got to be happening to other families who maybe don't know how to advocate for themselves to get that taken care of before their vouchers run out. So what do we know about, like, efforts that the clinics may be making, or things that we can do to help with that? Because I'm just like, how are these vouchers even being used if the clinics don't even have appointments for people to use those vouchers?
And that's the crux, and this is not criticism of SNAP at all, right? Because SNAP is doing what they can do, right?
Absolutely.
But vouchers in this day and age are not an effective way to provide spay neuter services for this very reason. Because of the amount of hoops that you have to go through in order to get an appointment. And I can guarantee you that her story is not the only story, and not the only person who is having to jump through multiple hoops and probably give up. Or they do get the appointment and then their transportation falls through. There are so many factors that are playing into this, and that is why, again, I think it's really smart that Thurston County Humane Society is stepping away to reevaluate how they provide that service. Because vouchers 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, were a great way to provide spay neuter to a community that didn't have a low-cost clinic. A shelter that I ran in Arizona, it was a rural community. All of our veterinarians were on board, and it was a great way for us to provide access to those services without the community members having to leave, and it made a huge impact. But what I would say in this day and age, do I think that would be the same thing? No, I don't. Because again, these are all corporate owned veterinary clinics now. It's, I was negotiating with private clinics that were owned by veterinarians that were willing to give me a discount for grant funds. It's not the same day and age anymore. And we also have to recognize that even free spay neuter, so even somebody who's getting a free spay neuter, the cost is not genuinely free, right? Because that is time off work, that's gas, that's any additional things that they have to purchase that weren't included in that free low-cost spay neuter. A lot of times pain medication isn't included, you have to buy that. It's aftercare. All of those things take into consideration. So even if a surgery is free, it's not really free to that person receiving the surgery.
So I got a question. In gift card world, they call the unused portion breakage, right? And so do these guys tell you like their breakage? Do they tell you how many didn't get used that expired?
It's about 30%.
30% don't get used. Do they, well, but they continue at their number of 40, right? So
Correct.
every 3.5 months, 40 of them don't get used.
Possibly, yeah. And then that money, since it's unused, they can extend it into another month.
Is that
I
what they
do
do?
just want to point out what Commissioner Klaus was talking about too, of the appointments being booked out and solidly booked out as well. So I think when it sounds like maybe they are providing more slots available, recognizing that potentially some of them don't show up.
Right.
I also think cats get pregnant if it's a cat. They cancel that appointment, which then exceeds the amount of vouchers they can get to get the cat and the kittens fixed.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are
And
limitations.
that's compounding this whole problem.
Because it's only for one.
Right.
Councilmember Green has a question.
Councilmember Gray.
Yeah, thanks. So Sarah, as you go to conferences and work with other folks in your industry, are you seeing any jurisdictions having luck with creative solutions to this? I mean, how do we like it's super helpful to know this information, but what do we, how do we support it? I think Commissioner Klaus started to get to that and
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent question. And the bottom line is whether it's JASCOM, whether it's another nonprofit, somebody, there is an obvious need to have a low-cost spay neuter clinic in this area. Who is going to step up and do that is not necessarily clear. And I think the most successful ones are ones that are supported not just in nonprofits necessarily, like where they're having to chase grant money and get donations. The most successful ones are mutually beneficial, where jurisdictions have also participated as part of their like public health, public safety portion of it. So for example, the city of Mesa in Arizona actually dedicated $3 million to trap, neuter, return efforts to basically pay free spay neuter for any community cats in the city of Mesa. So it takes commitments like that. I'm not saying 3 million, I'm just using that one as an example. It takes a commitment from everybody in the community to make something like that happen, because it does cost money to run. From just looking at our area, we could successfully keep one up and going, but you're still looking at an easy $500,000 to get started.
It sounds like, Sarah, there are some other options too, rather than just having a potential permanent, spay neuter clinic, you've talked about kind of the MASH approach, the mobile approaches. So, going from 0 to 100 miles per hour of having one established, there could be some intermediary steps as well.
Correct. In between having a permanent facility, organizations, JASCOM, we could be looking at inviting organizations that do MASH clinics or getting on a regular schedule for Pasado Space Station to come down, but they're one. And again, there could be some creative solutions in what does that look like? Where are they taking place? How is it being paid for? Is it just us booking and finding a spot? Is it grant money that's actually paying for them to come down? So it's at a lower cost even to the community. It's all of those things to consider.
I think with the spay and neuter, like it's fairly easy to cover the cost of your spay and neuter, but then it's the overhead that kind of kills you. It's the staff pay and or the building, the maintenance on the equipment, your oxygen tanks or oxygen supply, it's all the other stuff that is the spay, the actual surgical cost when you break it out over time is not that high, but it's the everything else that
Supplies and payroll.
yeah, payroll, and then just your overhead, like your facility is a huge thing. Your water, electricity, all that kind of stuff, utilities and all that is, and when I ran the numbers myself, that's where I could cover the cost of the surgery, I could cover employees and staff, but I couldn't make the overhead. Because it just, the prices, and I think, the ideal solution is a permanent facility of some type. And then servicing, Mason, Grays Harbor, Lewis and Thurston from this side of Thurston County, because it's kind of centrally located and people that can drive could come in. And especially if you could do, 50 surgeries a day, that's 1,000 a month, you would make a dent.
So like a low cost building that
Yeah.
maybe needed some work.
Yeah, and as a nonprofit, you may be able to get, a tax write-off, somebody would donate a building or something like that, where you can't do that in private practice with a commercial, no one's gonna donate a vet.
Or a space that was in a new building that
Yeah,
shared clinic
Yeah.
space.
and then,
Wow, what a,
Is there-
that's a.
yes, and then,
That's a good idea. Something right there.
yeah, you just need the interim between, because that vision is like 6 to 8 years away, and our problem is immediate,
And is this room really open?
You can promise, you could promise the clerk over here that it would be spotless.
We could lay down top.
Anything.
There are some vacant buildings around here.
There's some property somewhere that someone might not need.
Think
that.
Spirit Halloween, right? We behind a building, we use it temporarily.
Like Spirit Halloween.
Those are all things to
I
consider.
think we just follow Spirit.
That's just the same flash.
We do November, we do October.
I think, maybe to go back to how Sarah started this, as this came up in conversation at the last JASCOM meeting for wanting a little bit more information. And so for tonight's purposes, really just kind of providing that general overview to you all so we can kind of understand where we are at here in Thurston County. We can always go and explore some more options and alternatives and get more information to you all. Obviously, we know we're working on a new facility. We know that there's some possibilities out there and we want to explore that. Sarah and her team can take a look into what could be some alternatives to bring back to the commission at a later date for further discussion.
Yes.
So I guess that's the question for JASCOM is, would you like us to come back with a little bit more information potentially at a later meeting just on what could be possibilities in this community?
Yeah, this definitely seems like a conversation that would be worth continuing. Especially as, everybody reports out to their different jurisdictions. Are you guys in favor of continuing this conversation in future meetings? Okay.
So are we talking about spay and neuter?
Low cost.
Well, as you guys were talking, I think, so first and foremost, if you own an animal, that is not deemed a necessity unless it's something that is a guide dog or service animal. So in this day and age where Medicaid is being cut or being talked about being cut, you're going to find it very, very difficult for us to come up with a resource or a funding source that is going to do a low-cost spay and neuter in our county for the simple fact that other things, for example, more jurisdictions are asking our citizens to pay more in property tax, sales tax, and all so on and so on and so forth. So there are other competing priorities that we don't have, or at least here in Tustin County, here in Tumwater, I don't know if our budget can actually address or identify any line item that will go towards a low cost or maintain a low cost facility, or having one come to Tustin County that we could actually chip into.
Yeah, and this is, we wouldn't be discussing any kind of a ballot measure or anything like that. This would just be private. But at this point, it's just conversation. Because as we grow as a county, we know that we cross 500, 600,000 people. This is an option that we need to have in our belt. And saying that, hey.
What is the use of having a conversation when you don't have the means to address that? I mean, that would just be futility. You and I could talk all day about having a low-cost spay and neuter in Tustin County, but we need to find a way to address the payment or the services that is being provided by a entity or the entities that bring out to our county, right? So that is the key.
Yeah, well, in one case, we were shovel ready on a project. It was conversation, and we were shovel ready, and then the governor said, you know what, we have money to give you for that. So it was only because that we were ready and we had made some steps to be ready that we were able to receive those dollars. So I'm not saying that, we need to, dedicate a whole bunch of JASCOM meeting time towards it, but I would like to continue the conversation so that if a time comes where, funding becomes available, we've had the conversations and we know how to move forward, or at least we have a consensus of what we would like to see happen.
Then on that note, I will ask that you come to the table with a funding source or funding sources that you think we could tap into as we make that discussion, because just discussing something in futility is not what we ought to be doing. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help me, it's a waste of our time.
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
I will say, bringing up the governor and the state, so in 2024, there was money allocated to do an animal welfare survey throughout the state. This year, that survey went out to all animal welfare organizations of all kinds, from municipalities to nonprofits to rescues to spay neuter clinic, with the idea that they were trying to get an idea of what resources are out there and what the needs are, so that they can make decisions in the future of what might be beneficial for this state, including there has been an ask on the table multiple years for direct spay neuter funding to happen, to go to the different organizations, with the looking at the Washington Federation of Animal Care and Control Agencies, who already manages the spay neuter license plate grant. So there is a spay neuter license plate that you can purchase that goes to state funds, that is grant funded spay neuter. That organization is the administrator of that grant. And so the state has been looking at multiple years. It hasn't gone past, obviously for budgetary reasons, and things happen. With the idea that state funding might come down to help with animal welfare resources in the next few years.
And Peter, one of the reasons why we would even consider continuing the conversation is that almost 2,900 people left the county to go get a surgery at a lower cost in another county. So that number is probably going to grow. But as the people who are elected to represent those people, I think we kind of owe it to them to at least have said, you know, hey, we've talked about this.
I like what Sarah just said. Sarah did identify some potential sources of where we could look into. But if you look at med surgery, right? I have Kaiser. My insurance allows me to go from here to Pierce County to do surgery, to do whatever. I'm sure yours does the same thing too. So it is not unusual to have people from Thurston County travel to other counties for services. So that's just a given. But what I'm saying is, if we are, so this is a good discussion, a very, very good discussion. I mean, if we are going to fix why they go outside of the county, we should identify a source that will make sure that they stay here and receive those services. So just talking about it is not going to help us. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's a really good point. And I would clarify that, you know, as part of the diligence on this, Commissioner, we'd be looking at what could be possible funding sources, what could be possible partnerships, and bringing that back up for further discussion as we move through the process. So that's an excellent point.
Yep. Good point. And definitely needs to be part of the conversation. Okay, so any other discussion on low-cost spay neuter? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our last agenda item, which is our budget amendment. And back to you, Sarah.
Hold on, I was jumping ahead of the game into the other presentation, not the budget amendment.
Director's report.
Apologies. So last meeting in April, staff brought forth a budget amendment to ask for oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
The L and I.
Yep. I am so sorry.
L and I went from
Totally just left my brain. And when we talked about that staff report, unfortunately, we did not have a quorum at the time. So the issue is that we budgeted for this budget cycle, $6,200 for our L&I pool. But as we found out, we have had enough injury reports that our rating has unfortunately gone up a little bit. And this is not, when I say we, this is not Joint Animal Services, this is the City of Lacey as a whole. The City of Lacey's rating has gone up, which means we have to pay a larger pool than what we budgeted for. And so the staff is recommending that we do a budget amendment for
$924.
Thank you.
$12,924.
24 cents.
To cover our L&I pool this year, and knowing that this has changed, we'll be able to budget it more accurately for 2026 budget.
Okay. I did share that in my last report out to the council about, and it wasn't just us. It was a couple of other places also that the L&I number had changed. So we were at 0.864 or something like that. And then we went to 1.2, 1.3, somewhere in that ballpark. Significant change in terms of the monetary amount, but yeah, we're not alone in this. I found out a couple council meetings ago. And so I was able to bring that to the council. In fact, the mayor is on the Washington State Retail Association board, and also brought the same thing to us about one of his reports. So it's happening across the board. And with that, I would like to entertain a motion to approve our 2025 budget amendment of $12,900.24 for AWC L&I retro pool assessment for Joint Animal Services. Would anybody like to provide said motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about this item before we go to a vote? Seeing none, all in favor of our motion to approve our 2025 budget amendment of $12,900.24 for AWC L&I retro pool assessment for joint animal services, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously and we have approved the motion. Next on our agenda tonight is the director's report and Sarah, please.
Now I'm
Move
back
us-
on track. All right. So we had a really great legislative season. I'm happy to share that we had 4 animal protection bills pass in the state legislature. 2 of which, Joint Animal Services was active in talking with our legislators about and really advocating for, and those 2 are House Bill 1149, which was to update definitions and close loopholes, along with our animal fighting and cruelty bill. And HB 1201, which was identifying accommodations in emergency and extreme weather events. So this is for identifying accommodations for animals. So with this bill, jurisdictions are now required to not just identify shelters for humans, but there has to be a version to either co-shelter with your pet or a separate shelter identified to house pets in case of emergency and extreme weather events. Because as we know, people do not evacuate during these emergencies if they cannot bring their pets with them. So this is making sure that we have safer evacuation plans in case of emergency.
And so those are for extreme emergency event or climate events, so
Correct.
that would be snow.
But it would be like wildfires, earthquake, anytime that an emergency shelter would need to be set up, or Red Cross would need to come to set up shelter for a community.
So then we also need to say, hey, now they have to set up for animals. as well.
Correct. They have to identify a place for animals to go or a place that animals can come with.
I think more frequently as of late, have been extreme heat.
Yes.
and Cold.
Okay, that's what I was thinking too, because I think we had a 105 temperature degree day like 2 summers ago, 3 summers ago, whatever it was. We had to create some cooling centers, stuff like that.
2 other bills of note. So House Bill 1046 was around the rescue of vulnerable people and pets from motor vehicles. So previously in the RCWs, only a police officer or animal control officer could basically break a car window if a child or an animal was trapped in a motor vehicle in extreme temperatures. Normally, extreme temperatures are heat in this case. Now this protects the liability around a member of the public who has appropriately documented. If they have called emergency services and they are not close, now a member of the public could break into that vehicle to rescue a person or a pet without damages being pushed onto them for breaking that window. So it's kind of like a Good Samaritan bill, basically. And then the other one, SB 5065, is prohibiting traveling animal acts. So this prohibits large animals who are in, so basically circuses who have large animals as part of their performance cannot bring those animals to Washington, or they are not permitted to perform here anymore. So if you have, for example, Barnum and Bailey Circus, I don't even know if they're around anymore, but that's what I'm using. I'm dating myself. They would not be permitted to come to the state of Washington now because they have animals in their act.
What led to this?
That one I don't have all, because we weren't actively involved in this one, so I don't have all the details. I do know just from an overarching in general, animals in traveling circus acts or performing acts are not kept to humane standards. There's usually a lot of cruelty and neglect involved.
Because it sounds like the puppy mill thing.
A little, except they're traveling Or you could think of in terms of like some of those traveling roads, like roadside zoos, except like they're traveling, where the care and condition of the animals are not met, and a lot of times training standards are not humane. And so this would prohibit from any of those acts being able to travel to the state of Washington.
How do you define large animal?
They defined it in here as it's basically all animals, and they listed out a couple of exceptions in it, and I apologize, I don't know those off the top of my head. But basically elephants, lions, tigers, bears, most monkeys, camels, basically any animals that are performing. They gave a very small list of what was exceptions, and that is because there's a permanent animal act, I believe, in Eastern Washington that has specific animals that has been around for a very long time. And so there are certain animals that are exempt from that, but overarchingly, the majority of animals that you would normally see in a traveling act are prohibited from being here in Washington now. I think we're the 8th in the country to do this as well. Part of the legislative session as well, we were officially granted $1 million from the state to be contributed to our design and building fund. So extremely large thank you to the 22nd Legislative District for really supporting this and supporting the jurisdictions in this regional ask. And an additional thank you to Representative Parsley, who sponsored this.
Sarah, can you remind me what the ask on the legislative agenda was?
It was originally for $2 million.
Thank you.
So I will call it with Washington State having an operational deficiency, like they were going to have to cut to meet budget. I will say that this was a very generous regional contribution for us.
Agreed. How far will this million carry us in terms of design?
About half.
Okay.
45% to half.
We still got some work to do.
Correct.
We definitely have some work to do, and we've been meeting with the jurisdictions to have conversations about some of the other funding options and alternatives, and so we hope to come back to this group in a couple months with an update on that.
Has the, well, I guess I was thinking about the animal tax district that we discussed, but I did run into Representative Parsley, and she said she'll be potentially sponsoring that next session.
Correct. She has so far committed to continuing to sponsor that bill next year. And I will be coordinating with her later this year to start doing stakeholdering to make sure that we are being inclusive and considering all avenues for how this bill is written, so we're not leaving anything off the table.
Growing and moving.
I wish Sierra was here, but she is on PTO, but I'm gonna still go brag about her anyway. She was actually recently elected to the board of the Washington State Animal Fighting Task Force. So she is now an official board member of that organization. Just for to add a little bit more to that, so the Animal Fighting Task Force actually sent help to our large-scale cockfighting case in February. So we had members of the task force on site volunteering and helping us, as well as helping the deputies in collecting evidence, because the Washington State Animal Fighting Task Force also has a database where they are tracking animal fighters in the state of Washington and what their connections look like. So they're able to usually add a bit more context in these cases. They also came down, as Megan was saying, to do a 4-hour training for our new volunteer and foster program.
Down from where?
This person came from King County. So on to that, they had their very first training, which was an all-day training to get all the new members or their orientation. Everybody will be at the end of June, I believe, will have completed their ride-along with a field services officer. They attended the specialized training this Saturday. So now our volunteers are prepped and ready to assist and be called when we have a large-scale cruelty case.
It's awesome.
So again, this program was developed in recognition that when we have these cases, basically operational decisions have to be made in terms of service. So when we have these large scale cases like this, we're having to choose what services are being provided that day by the shelter because we have to close down usually some services in order to have enough staff to be able to go out for these. So this is to kind of help mitigate some of that and to be more prepared and have more people specially trained on site to help us in terms of getting animals loaded, documented, driven back here to the shelter, unloading, like all of that back end stuff that is also taking place during an actual investigation when we're collecting evidence. There's all that kind of back end work that still needs to happen.
Yeah, I remember last time, somebody asked, you know, when we go out and do one of these things, what is, you know, the cost to our organization, right? Like, how long do we have to close for? And I think, you said it was 1 day, right?
Usually.
Usually 1 day. Okay.
We don't shut down all services. We usually shut the doors. So adoptions usually closes, in-person licensing. And like if somebody wants to come in and like fill out a statement in person, but our phones stay open. We're still writing up calls. We still have a field officer responding to calls. We're still in taking strays from walk-ins.
Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what does this do to that?
Potentially lets us keep the doors open.
Yeah.
Okay, so doors can stay open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, cause then we'd send them versus staff.
Okay.
We'd still have staff
Yes.
going.
Yes.
Staff going. But instead of having,
Just
you know,
volunteers.
10 of our 22 staff going, we could have 5 or 6 of our staff go.
And then 5 or 6 of those guys.
Correct.
Okay.
So that way it's not, when we're having over half of our staff have to go out on a call, or not necessarily go out, but also have to like stop what they're doing to literally prepare kennels, prepare all of that for that intake. And if we don't have enough kennel space, setting up all of those additional crates and getting those prepared. So there's a lot of back end behind the scenes work that takes place that really we can utilize these volunteers to do. And then on the other part of that, having these fosters that are specially trained. We've talked about in past meetings how a lot of times these victims of cruelty are coming from bad situations and they don't know how to necessarily be an animal or have a lot of medical issues in terms of neglect, severe neglect. You're looking at a dog or cat or whatever that, have to be on a specific feeding regimen to be able to put weight back on them without making them sick. And so they're gonna have weird behavior tics because, example, if they're starving, they're not gonna want you to touch their food. Like, so it's in recognition of knowing that these animals are going to need more care than your average foster animal.
Awesome.
Oh, I kept the title up there, so sorry, and this was supposed to be an adoption event. We had another fee-waived adoption event.
This is
Oh.
a good day.
We had another fee-waived adoption event sponsored by Best Friends. Again, this is from the $25,000 that they gave us last year to sponsor fee-waived events. We had 19 cats, 17 dogs for a total of 36 adoptions, and that was the last week in May.
Yeah, that's great.
Not almost everything. Just a quick update, we are currently on hold with the Mason County contract. We are waiting to hear back from Mason County. So once I know more, you'll know more.
Sarah, what's the story behind these fantastic photos?
So we had, Megan actually got our, there's a photographer that we've worked with a number of times. She's also did our Santa Paws this last year. She came Friday and Saturday of the adoption event to take photos of people getting their adoptions with their pets. And then also in between, she had a lovely setup where we could get some glamour shots of some of our adoptable pets.
Nice.
Really nice. Huh, so does,
Oh,
sorry,
Yeah,
no,
no.
go ahead. I was wondering, is the new transferring of animals to Mason County Humane Society in preparation to go into Mason County contract?
Not on our part.
Not,
No, they reached out and were like, hey, we have capacity for cats, to take cats. Would you like us to? And going into kitten season, we're always like, sure, why not? If a rescue group wants to pull, they can. And so we have worked with them for them to pull cats on a regular basis.
good.
And Happy Tails. This was Bruce, now Bouncy. Bruce was an example of kind of what we talked about earlier, where he is just an amazing dog. Did well with other dogs, did well with cats, loves people. The shelter environment was not a good environment for him to be in. It was causing him massive amounts of stress. He was losing weight. He was barking all the time, jumping. We could not get this amazing dog adopted. However, we had a new foster sign up originally to be a weekend warrior. She was going to take him for the weekend so that he could have a break from the shelter and reset before he came back. That weekend turned into, I'd like to foster him longer. I think I can do this for a couple of weeks to really give him a break. Which then turned into, gosh, I used to have a pity. I really love pitties. I miss mine. I want to keep him. And so Bruce became Bouncy and he is now living his best life. That is his,
Roommate?
not roommate. This is his new human grandparents. That's their dog. So I guess that would be his uncle, right? So that's him and his doggy uncle snoozing on the couch together. They sent photos, they went out on a walk with her parents and their dog. And all the dogs in the neighborhood loved him, like they, evening walk, everybody's out walking their dogs. He didn't meet a dog that he didn't like. Got along swimmingly with everybody and she just fell in love and so she decided to keep him.
He definitely looks more of a couch dog than a kennel dog.
Absolutely.
We're trying to see if the home would be willing to foster his girlfriend.
Ooh.
He has a husky girlfriend named
Shelter.
Eve.
So much so that Bruce, so one of the things that we had difficulty with Bruce is Bruce would love to magically disappear from his kennel. And I mean magically because he wasn't climbing over. We found out that he was literally like shift shaping through walls. Like he literally was going in between the panels to get to his husky girlfriend Eve, and we would find him repeatedly just in the other kennel with Eve.
Yep.
And Eve, we are finding out she was adopted but then returned because she is showing signs of not getting along with other female dogs. But she got along great with Bruce. And so, yeah, we're gonna reach out to this foster to see if she wants to
Maybe
foster.
it could be house for a little bit bouncy.
So yeah, we're gonna see if this foster wants to give Eve a little break. So Bouncy and Eve could be reunited for a week or two to hang out while we find Eve a new home. But yeah, Bruce loves dogs so much, he was shape shifting in between the kennels to go hang out with other dogs.
You know, the dog that I got from you guys was an escape artist as well. You guys came and checked my entire perimeter and he got out. I can't tell you how many times.
That's a lot.
Yeah. This Aspire called me, a little school down the street. Oh, yeah, your dog is down here. I'm like, oh my God. You know, he's only.
I forgot to enroll him in school.
Yeah, they brought all the kids inside from recess. He was out there.
Oh,
Terrorizing the school.
Well, yeah, licking all the kids. Okay, well, with that, does anybody have any questions or comments about the director's report before we wrap this up? Okay, well, it is 7:29 and we have come to the end of our agenda. And if there is nothing further from any of the participants here, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.